Awesome. So we can go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us for the Clearance Preparedness program. This is the second module of a 10-module series. My name is Austin Schock. I'm just going to do some quick housekeeping things. So if you are in here, please make sure that your Zoom name reflects your first and your last name. We are taking attendance for your virtual badge, so that way you can receive credit. Additionally, if you've already registered, you do not need to register again. We take attendance, as I mentioned, so once you attend those 8 out of 10, then you will receive that badge. And then I'm sure, as you have already figured out, we will send you a calendar invite monthly of the updated Zoom link. I would like to introduce Eric Berger. He will be leading this call with John Tellerico.
Thank you very much, Austin. I did see someone and it just kind of flashed by. They raised their hand. So the reminder, there's a Q&A button there. I guess I'll let Austin take a look at some of those questions because those seem pretty administrative. But yeah, it would be important that you need to be able to set your name. So we'll try to get down to the bottom of that because we do have to the end to get that right. As Austin did say, this is the Clearance Preparedness program. In the second module, basically, this is the guide to the clearance paperwork process. And today I've got Mr. John Tellerico, who's the director of the Export and Secure Research Compliance Office here at Virginia Tech. Before we get into kind of the meat of what's going on today, just a quick recap of the first module. We did talk about the cool places that you can work inside and outside of government with a clearance. We went through a broad overview of the clearance process, including some of the things that you might want to consider, the second thoughts you might have. And then today, we're going to do that deep dive into the start of the clearance process. It's called the Standard Form 86, and we talked about the scary questions you might need to ponder last month. Now we're going to get into the actual questions. So with that, I'm going to hand the screen over to Mr. Tellerico.
Thank you, sir, and thank you everyone for the invitation to speak today. I'm going to throw some slides up here on the screen for us. And go in mode. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that okay. Dr. Berger, does that look all right?
That looks great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, first, I want to, again, after I say thank you again for inviting me today, I'm actually very sad I missed last week's talk to hear about the cool places you can work with a clearance. So I'll dive in, as Dr. Berger said, into the different nuances of the paperwork itself, and also leave some time for questions. But before I get into that, I have a couple of things I want to set the table with here. First, I want to tell you a little bit about our office, the Office of Export and Secure Research Compliance here at Virginia Tech. We oversee compliance in a number of areas. I highlight our 3 pillars here: export control and sanctions, research security, and industrial security. So our facility clearance and all our personnel clearances would fall under that last pillar there, under industrial security. And we do manage this on behalf of the entire university. We have a policy. It's numbered there. If you're really interested in reviewing university policy, I won't disappoint you. You can check that out there. The other part I wanted to do is a quick overview, and you all may have discussed some of this last week as well, but just the evolution of the National Industrial Security Program and its manual, the NISPOM, National Industrial Security Program Operating Manual. There's just a history lesson here. This dates all the way back to 1940 with the first executive order from FDR, re-up through the years, through additional executive orders from a number of past presidents. And then here recently, just a couple of years ago, just shy of its 2nd birthday, the NISPOM was actually codified in the Code of Federal Regulations. So it went from a manual and a regulation managed by DOD for certain areas there to an actual part of the federal regulations. And I've put the citation there. Again, policy junkies, feel free to go Google that and you will find everything you need to know about what's in the NISPOM. One of the changes that came with this move from a manual to the regulations was incorporating some things that really the intelligence community had been doing for a number of years. So it created some synergies there between intelligence community requirements and what we see in the Security Executive Agents Directives, or the SEADs, and what the Department of Defense had been doing that was a little different. So I give a couple of links there, and Dr. Berger has these slides and can share by all means with anyone here who's interested as well. So you can get these links and you can check these out for more information. So this magical equation is what we go to all the time. Clearance plus need to know equals access. We're going to talk today about the clearance part in great depth. And how do you get that? And what does that mean? And what is the background investigation? What do you need to provide the government to get you through that process? But it is just one piece of the equation. Need to know. And as I like to say, it's not the same as want to know. You may have a clearance at top secret, but that does not mean you have the ability to see all top secret information everywhere. You have to have that need to know component in order to get access. So I plug that equation there because that question comes up every once in a while. And I hear it a lot of times, even from some folks that I think are too seasoned to ask the question is, well, I have a clearance at this level, so I'm good, right? You got half the equation. So we work with our program people, our government sponsors, the information owners. That's how you validate the second piece. But we do need to start with the clearance. And starting with the clearance, let's look at the 3 levels of classified information. It's here. It hasn't changed since 1940, confidential, secret, top secret, and it's all on the basis of the damage to national security. These all start with somebody at the government who has original classification authority saying, I'm classifying this information at this level. And then from there, you look for need to know, additional individuals with the 2 pieces there with clearance and need to know for further access. Now, I like to point out here, some folks may have heard of other things like SCI or special access programs or other things that aren't these 3 levels. And it's important to know that these are just levels. All of these other things are accesses. You may have to go through additional background beyond just the initial SF-86 for your clearance level to get to those additional accesses. And that is all based on whatever agency owns that information, their process. And I'll tell you, most of them are different. So we're going to start today with the baseline. We're going to talk about how we go through the SF-86 process to get that initial clearance eligibility determination. So Office of Personnel Management, OPM, they have actually structured these 5 tiers of investigations, and I've put some detail there on what each one might be used for. But the 2 that are of importance to us are the tier 3 and the tier 5. So as you can see there, tier 3 really aligns with secret or L if you're in DOE land, confidential or secret or L. T5 would go with top secret, which would include SCI adjudications, and then Q level clearance for Department of Energy. Okay, so for that initial clearance application, since we're looking at the SF-86, as Dr. Berger had in the opening slide, there's a link there for the OPM. You need to pay attention also to the version. They update this every once in a while. Most of them don't change too dramatically, but the way that at least Department of Defense is pretty standardized. They use this process or this system called EQIP, Electronic Questionnaires for Investigations Processing. It's a little bit on the outs right now. There's a new system coming online called eApp, probably later this fall, based on current timelines from the government. But for today, EQIP is the system of record. You can download SF-86s, and I always tell folks it's a good idea to do that to help gather the information, but don't get yourself hung up on the form and format. just get your information together, because you'll get access to this eKIP where you'll document everything in the official system. You'll have to do some signature forms, and then the government will use that as their investigation and adjudication document. And again, DCSA released some guides on and some info on how to complete this that is still very much applicable today, even though it's getting on to about 5 years old. Again, I'll jump back up to the second bullet. Some agencies will use other means. Not everybody uses eKIP. It just all depends on who is sponsoring your clearance. So this is a busy slide, but if you haven't looked it up yet after last week's class, I decided to throw all the SF-86 sections onto one slide for quick reference. And you can see it all here, and it is very busy and very full. And I understand you all talked about maybe some of the more, I would call them problematic areas or difficult areas for some, but this is the full snapshot. You got to provide all this information. And some of it, depending on which tier investigation, a 3 or a 5, you may only have to go back 7 years. Some things you may have to go back 10 years. Some of these areas are lifelong. You know, what have you ever done in these areas? So each section will lay that out for you. You just need to pay close attention on your timelines and any of those that are time driven like that. For example, the where have you lived and employment activities. I can tell you from my experience, that gets people hung up. You have to have a consistent time frame for the 10 years. In that case, those both are 10 years, no matter what the tier level is you're going for. So, make sure if you're submitting an application in March of 2023, you don't have any gaps going all the way back to March of 2013 for those areas. That's just an example. I see that happen more often than I care to admit for folks we put through the process, that there's gaps in it, and it causes problems and makes the investigators ask more questions. We can go through, I may come back to this slide at the end to prompt some more questions, but for now it's there, and I'm going to skip ahead and let's talk about the actual steps of the investigative process. So everything starts with a program need. Somebody has said you as an individual need access to classified information. So that's going to come from a government sponsor. It may come from an industry partner who has the contract from the government that has included us as a subcontractor, for example. You could be asked as a consultant. There's a number of different ways this program need gets identified. But somebody has to say you need access to classified information that's in an authority to make that decision. At that point, the clearance requirement is processed at the necessary level based on that program need. And that's where you start your SF-86. So you start working your SF-86, you gather your information, you submit it to the agency. The government's going to do a background investigation, which is going to start with your SF-86, usually involves a series of interviews. I'm aware that right now when we do tier 3s, and for secret level, there's not as many interviews. There are not as many interviews being conducted. And sometimes they're not even contacting the applicant either. They're really moving the secrets along. For top secrets, you are at least going to be interviewed. I can guarantee you that. Now, whether they go and interview your family members or friends or coworkers, that's on a case-by-case basis. And every investigator has the ability to do whatever they want, essentially. Some of them go very thorough, talk to a lot of people, takes a lot of time. Some of them don't and feel comfortable just talking with the applicant. So all of that plays into the timelines for how long this process takes. Then the investigation will eventually close when the investigator's happy, and they send those results to an adjudicator. And it's actually the adjudicator that will make the determination on the eligibility based off of the information from the investigator. So there's a multi-step process here, as you can see from here. Then if the adjudicator has all the information that they need, they would then approve or reject eligibility based off of the information that they have. I put this out as just an awareness FYI that I like to talk to folks about. We are aware that some background investigators are looking at social media, what they can publicly see. So if you have social media and your account is very locked down, then they're only going to see what's available to the public. So that's one security tip I would give you all is, I'm not saying social media is terrible and you shouldn't have it. That's not accurate at all, but watch your security settings. If there's stuff that you don't want out there for everyone to see, make sure everyone can't see it. Because again, if everyone can see it, so can the background investigators, and they are using that information. I've had a couple of folks come back and tell me that they've had investigators ask for all of their friends on Facebook. Yeah, that can get complicated really fast too, especially if you have a broad network of folks. Same about LinkedIn. So they're using this information to help with their investigations and adjudications. Now, everything boils back to 13 adjudicative guidelines. And I went ahead and put a list here with some small details about each one. So these are the 13 adjudicative guidelines. And I've got little snippets beside each one. And I want you to notice a pattern. This is how the adjudicators are thinking. Unquestioned allegiance to the U.S. That's the first one right there. But then as you start getting down to some of these more sensitive areas, questionable judgment, impaired judgment, lack of judgment. They're doing a whole person assessment on you. Are you trustworthy? That's essentially the question they're trying to answer through this process. They're getting as much as they can from what you tell them. They're getting the rest of the story through interviews and other information like your social media. And they're putting together this entire assessment on you to determine your trustworthiness. Do you have any information in your background that subjects you to blackmail or compromise or anything like that? So again, the best advice I would ever give anyone who's completing an SF-86 is tell them everything. You put everything on there, no matter what it makes you look like. By being transparent and telling them what you've done in your past, it puts everything out there so that you can say, hey, even if I don't have a completely clean record, I've made some mistakes somewhere in my past, that you're disclosing those, you're open to talking about those. It helps them adjudicate those situations. This part here, this continuous vetting and continuous evaluation, it's part of the eligibility requirements. So this program is fairly new in the last few years. And what they have done is once they've done the initial adjudication, they said, you are eligible for access at whatever level. Then they enroll you in this continuous evaluation process, and they do ongoing reviews more in real time. The intent of this program was to completely wipe out the time-driven reinvestigation requirements. So it used to be on a tier 5, you had to be reinvestigated every 5 years. On a tier 3, it would be 10 years. So what they were trying to do with this CECV program is say, forget about that. Don't worry about time-driven events. We're watching the things we can watch in publicly available records and databases, criminal databases, other things, where they can say, okay, we have found an issue. We're going to ask that person to submit a new SF-86 now because of this issue. Whether it's stuff they found or things that were reported due to reporting requirements, which we're going to get into here in a little bit. After a couple of years of this program, they really backtracked this to government, and they said, okay, you know what? We're not going to be solely reliant on CECV to trigger events to call people to send new SF-86s in. We're still going to do every 5 years for everyone. So they got rid of the 5 and 10, depending on the tier. They just said, everyone, every 5 years, you'll do a new one. And that way that gets their stuff up to date. I'm going to stress the importance of reporting, and we're going to get into that a little bit, because one of the things that I'm concerned of for folks, they're submitting SF-86s every 5 years. They may have new information to disclose that should have been information reported when it happened. So that's a big caution I will throw to everyone is once you're cleared and you're active, know your reporting requirements and ask folks like me or whoever holds your clearance, the security officer, make sure you understand what your reporting obligations are, because when that SF-86 comes up in 5 years, you want to remain consistent. So this is just a little pictogram here of what the continuous vetting process looks like. So again, they're looking for these database checks in these areas that they can access. Sometimes there's an alert that needs mitigation. Maybe it just needs monitoring. If it's something serious enough, it could lead to a clearance revocation in cases like that. And whether it's because of a CV flag and they suspend or revoke a clearance, or through the initial process, eligibility is denied. There is essentially an appeal process through it's Doha, Department of Hearing and Appeals, that will look at your case, and you can go through that process, and it's an extensive process. So again, the CV process is designed to catch things that aren't already reported. And another plug for reporting: if the CV process catches something and they go look in the system of record and they see it's been reported, you get a brownie point for that. All right. So do your reporting. Your reporting is critical to again, staying transparent, keeping your level of trust for the federal government as high as possible. So here's the slide on reporting. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, C3 is where this comes from. There are different reporting requirements based off the level of access that you have. Top secret or Q has everything. Confidential and secret and L has about half of them. What I always tell our folks here at Virginia Tech, if you ever have your clearance held by us, we don't distinguish between the levels. We ask everybody to report everything, internally at least, and then we look at this chart to figure out which things need to go out to the government based on your level. So we've tried to make it easier here at Virginia Tech so people don't have to have this chart plastered on their desk wall or anything like that. If you have something in any of these areas or anything that correlates to a section of the SF-86, report it to your security office right away. And so you all can go through that process of, is this something that has to be reported to the government? Is this something I just hang on to myself? Is this something we have to keep an eye on? Is it a concern for continuous vetting? All of those things. But reporting is really where this program has any kind of effect. People live. Things are going to happen. Life happens. And in those instances, especially instances you have no control over, making sure you're doing your reporting and you're keeping your security officer up to date on what's happening with you is the best situation you're going to put yourself in to keep your clearance. And that is actually all I have. So I think I got through that a little quicker than I thought I would, Dr. Berger. So I'm ready for questions. I was watching the Q&A light flash a few times, so I'll turn the mic back over to you to help us out here.
That'll be great. And I'll leave to Austin to answer someone who's asking an administrative question, but we do have a question. The person happens to be a veteran. And this is not necessarily limited to being a veteran, but someone who has a clearance. If they go for another job that requires a clearance, do they have to go through this whole process?
It depends. It depends when their clearance was last active. So folks that are fresh off active duty, probably not, because they've probably done this within the last few years. So that 5 years is going to be a big trigger mark from the last time you had to do it. Now, there is one of the sections here, and I don't know where it is on my chart. There it is. Second column, second row from the bottom, investigations and clearance record. So there is a section to say if you've been cleared before, you put in as much information as you know. Not everybody knows the exact month and year their last clearance was adjudicated. I can't tell you that for myself. If you know somebody at your security office, you can call and get that. Great. If not, estimate. A lot of these blocks have the ability to check a box that says I'm estimating. It's best guess for me. And let the folks on their side look at the system of record and get the full data. But yes, if you're a veteran and you've been cleared, especially you've been cleared before, there's a place to put that so they can see you've at least been through this process once, twice, 3 times before, depending on how long you've been around. But again, that 5-year mark is going to be really the tipping point on whether or not you have to do this again, or whoever's picking you up can just click a couple of buttons and give you a security in-doc brief and move on.
Yeah, we have a question that actually triggered a question that I had right in your opening, because we've got people from many of the CCI institutions, so not just Virginia Tech. And so it's kind of a two-parter. The first part is, do other institutions have something like OESRC? And the other is, what if you've got a clearance or had a clearance and maybe you're someplace else? it's not like I would call you because my last one was through you. Who would I call?
Okay, both good questions. So I'll take the first one first. Not every university is cleared. So there are some schools that avoid this like the plague. They just don't want to deal with it because it's very complicated and impacts how you can conduct certain research in certain labs. Others like Virginia Tech have said, well, this is important to us, so we'll invest in what it takes to do it. So really it's a conversation I would start with your school's research division and ask if they have a group that manages a facility clearance, or at least start with their export control office. I know most of the folks across the Commonwealth, so I could probably point you in the right directions if somebody from UVA or George Mason or VCU or ODU. Who'd I miss, Eric? I think I got everybody. If anybody is from one of those places and you just want to ask me who to call, I can probably get you to the right place, and I'm fine to help there. Because like I said, most of those places have somebody like me. Whether or not they do classified research is another thing, but at least they have somebody like me that might be able to help you out. And then the second question, the whole transfer of clearance, that's the one I hear about all the time. So I'm here, I'm at company X and I'm going to Virginia Tech, or I'm going to company Y. How do I get my clearance transferred over? I think is what you're getting at, right? So the nice thing is clearances can be held by multiple organizations. So if you have a relationship, and I see this quite often where there's somebody that's a consultant to the Navy, so the Navy holds a clearance for them. Well, that doesn't preclude Virginia Tech from also holding that clearance. And it all really goes back to, okay, how complicated does that make it for the individual? Because if you have something to report, guess what? You have to report it to everybody that holds your clearance. So you need to know who your points of contact are everywhere, and you need to know who holds your clearances. And that can be validated by anyone in any of the security offices. So if you know Virginia Tech holds your clearance and you know to call me, I can tell you who else is currently holding your clearance. I can see all of that. And when people jump and go from one place to another, you'll get debriefed at some point from your departing organization. Does not mean I can never get back to your record. So I always like to tell folks, hey, we're a service organization here for Virginia Tech. If you remember who I am and you know how to get to me, even after you've left Virginia Tech, I still have people call me every once in a while. I'm always happy to help. The individual's got to be okay giving me their social security number so I can look them up. But if that's not a hurdle, and for most people that have been at least through one clearance investigation, and if you've done it before 2015 when OPM got hacked, your information's already out there anyway. So yeah, most people are okay with saying, yeah, I'll give you my social over the phone. We can look it up. I can see everything. Who holds your record or who holds your clearances at what levels. Sometimes I can get contact information for a security officer too, if they put that information in the system of record. There's a lot of things I can find, and any other security officer can do that too. So get to know your security officer for wherever you are. At least one of them would be my best advice there.
Oh, great. Thank you. So looking at this chart here, row 3, column 3, employment activities, you touched upon it. We have a number of people on that are getting their associate's degrees. So I'm a 20-year-old, I'm graduating, I've got this job offer to go work for this cool defense contractor. And they say, where did you work when you were 10 years old? How can we help them out on that?
Oh, easy answer there, actually. This form will only take you back to 18. So if you're a 20-year-old, this form should be short. You have 2 years of data to give them. So I'll start with that one. But either way, whether you're 20 or you're 27 and a half, you're going back to 18. And that usually helps people with things like that because they're not concerned so much about what you did when you were a minor, right? We've all had weird jobs when we were kids. We cut grass, whatever it was, for the neighbors. But those things are so hit and miss usually that they don't really concern themselves. That's why they did the cutoff. They only want to know what you've done since you've been legally an adult. So now that in mind, you do the employment activities piece for students. And I'll be honest with you, this was hard for me too. My first go through of this is you really have to watch how you document your time as a student versus say in the summer. And you still need to have a consistent record all the way back through. So for students, you can put August to May, full-time student. that counts. You're employed as a full-time student. If you have other jobs during the year, you're going to want to list those too. For the summer, if you don't do anything, you need to put you're unemployed and just say, I'm a student, I'm off for the summer. If you have summer jobs, great, put them in there, but make sure your timelines all line up. If you go August to May, you need to have something that at least starts, June. So you can't say, July and have this gap of a month. I'm going to tell you, they're going to catch you. So you line up your dates. And the best way to do that, when you get it in every section, you can do a review of that section. And a security officer is actually required to review for completeness and accuracy. I'm going to tell you the way we do our reviews. I don't know you. I typically don't know everybody's life story. I'm seeing it for the first time on your SF-86, just as you're writing it, but I can read the dates. So I'm going through going, okay, I see August to May, and I see June to July. Then I see January. What happened for those 6 months? So through that review process, I can always return that back to the applicant and say, hey, you missed 6 months. You need to add another entry. And there's a bit of an iterative ability there between the applicant and the security office before it goes to the government. So there's that nice intermediary step to make sure everything in there, you didn't miss anything simple like that, or you didn't forget to check one of the check boxes under financial record. We look for those kind of things, and most security officers will do it the same way too.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is that, you're pretty helpful. But it sounds like, generally where you're getting a clearance, who's processing it probably would be a resource for, kind of that, both the kind of clearance you're getting and the organization that's sponsoring it. Because as you said, every organization seems to have their own quirky rules and things they're looking for.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, excuse me.
So I've got another, while we're looking at this. So one thing is, checking that unemployed box doesn't mean you don't get a clearance,
right,
especially if you're a student. Are there other things in here where it's like, wow, you put down that you got arrested or that you used drugs or whatever? Is that like an automatic red flag, you're done, go away?
No. I will always say time is the biggest adjudicator. So if things happen while you were in school and your first clearance applications when you're 40, and it's in one of those sections where you have to disclose if it doesn't matter when it was, they're looking at time as an adjudicator. And I will give you a good example of a couple of comments I've heard, because it's a pretty hot topic right now, and that's use of marijuana. So we have a number of states in the United States that have legalized the use of marijuana, either medically or recreationally. And the thing you need to keep in mind is a clearance is a federally issued thing. So you got to go by federal law, and marijuana is still illegal federally. So one of the things they'll have in here in the drug section is, you'll have to disclose that. Now, what I've been hearing from some of these adjudicative offices here lately is they know this is confusing, and not all security offices are training on this. So they're looking to see if it's an ongoing thing, or if it was, sometime a year or so in the past, year or more in the past, and the frequency of which. All of these things factor in. So I always like to tell folks there is no such thing as an automatic disqualifier. Tell them what has happened to you. Tell them what you've done, and they will go through that adjudicative process. And if you have things to disclose like that, I was arrested for a drunk in public when I was 22, and that was 10 years ago. I smoked marijuana 3 years ago while I was in Colorado. You've got to put that stuff on the form. Don't hide from it. Don't run from it. Because guess what? If there's a public record of it, they're going to find it. If you've been arrested, they're going to find it. So don't hide it. Don't hide anything. Transparency is the key in all this. Don't be ashamed of these things. The more you come out and you talk about it, you use your comments fields too. Hey, I didn't know that this was going to be a problem for me. I never thought I was going to get a clearance, whatever you want to say. And, I didn't know this was an issue 5 years ago when I was out in Colorado. Put that stuff down. That's important for them to know. Education is part of this. You learn what you can learn when you learn it, and it helps you be a better, it helps you be better, well-rounded, and in terms of a clearable person. recognizing and correcting what I'll call mistakes, even if you didn't know they were mistakes at the time, just kind of owning it is really the best you can do. You can't go back in time and change it at this point. You just got to own it and be candid about it and talk to them about it during your interview.
So in terms of the drug use, what if you were a minor? What if you were under 18? Because you don't mention that, like, we don't care where you worked below 18. What about drug use?
It goes back to, and I think that's one of those sections, drug use is a if you ever. So that would go back further. Most of these things will tell you, don't tell me anything past 18, but I'm pretty sure police record, psychological and emotional health, and drug use are ones that are lifetime. So if you did this in high school, you need to tell them. And just, again, it's same rules apply. Be transparent, put everything on there that you know at the time. Whatever you feel like you need to tell the investigator, because they're going to see it. They're going to read it, and they're going to want to know where your head was at the time, to figure out what you can do, right?
And I'm just thinking where my head was at. So, we've been focusing on drug use, but, what would you say on the financial side? So if someone had a bankruptcy, say 4 or 5 years ago, what would you, suggest on that?
It's the same thing. And I will tell you the best thing you all can do with these comments. There's comment section in every one of these sections. Do the investigator's job for them. Just tell them what happened. Yeah, I had bankruptcy 4 years ago. I just graduated. I had a mountain of debt. I couldn't get it figured out. So I went down this path. And since then, I've been trying to do all these things to build my credit back up, to do all. You basically try to do the investigators an adjudicative job for them when you have to put something that appears negative in any of these sections. So use those comment fields, really tell your story. And there's no cutoff limit. I don't think there didn't used to be. You can write a novel if you wanted to. Give them as much information as you can to just help them understand, again, what was going on with you at that time. And if it's very easily explainable in your mind, then it should be easily understood on theirs as they're reading through your explanation. And that goes for the same, whether it's severe financial distress like bankruptcy, which is called out on the form, or it's just a default on some kind of a debt. So the seed requirements actually go into more detail on both, the negative financial pieces, plus some things that can be actually, a positive issue. For example, you have to report if you get an unusual gift of over $10,000. So that for most folks, that might be an inheritance. That might be winning a lottery that's over $10,000. You win the Powerball jackpot, we're probably never seeing you again. So don't necessarily worry about that. But, you hit the 100 grand, you're going to have to disclose that. Like, that's an unusual influx of cash. Financial record, they're looking at both positive and negative. And a lot of that is if you go back to some of the case studies over the years, and you see what have happened to some folks. I can go all the way back to the cases like Aldrich Ames and Robert Hansen in the 80s, where they were paying for things that there was no way they could afford. They were living well above their means for government employees. And nobody could figure out how it was happening. Well, what happened? They were selling secrets and they got caught. So, I will tell you, it's not if you get caught doing that, that is not a good trade-off. The Russians notoriously didn't pay well for information. Nobody else does either nowadays. It's not worth the risk. So don't do that. Let's start there. But yes, that financial record piece is both looking at kind of negative things like bankruptcy and debt and default, but it could also be things that are more advantageous, like financial influxes that are unusual and the like.
Great. Actually, someone's asked a fascinating question. And it's kind of related, we've been talking about illegal use of drugs. So the question is, alcohol, which is not an illegal drug, but what if you were drinking it when you were under 21, which in most states now, they're actually making that illegal for the person doing the consumption. So what do you do with that one?
That is a great question. And you know what? Gold star that person. I've never been asked that question in 12 years. So I'm actually going to go, I'm pulling up an SF-86 right now, template, and we're going to go read what that section says. Because I want to read, I think this is more in line with the use of alcohol section because of what you just said. It's not an illegal drug. legal drugs are going to be covered under that section, but this is under use of alcohol. So let me just get to that section real quick and let's see what it says. We'll read it together.
Yeah.
So I'm in foreign business.
In
I've
fact,
gotta
you
go
want
a
to put it
little
up on
farther.
the screen so people can get a
Oh, yeah.
preview of what it looks like?
Yeah, let me do that. So let me bail out of here for a second and let me pull it up here. It's going to take me a second. Y'all know it's a big document, so it takes a minute to load.
Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds here. Excuse me. So go down, it's section 26, I think, 25. I'll make sure it loads so you don't have to watch my screen, sit here and spin for a minute, and then I'll reshare it back out. So there's illegal drugs and activity. I'm going to start with use of alcohol.
And while Mr. Tallarico is looking that up, this is why we love to teach, because we get these questions that are just like, wow, that's a great question. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Great question. I'm going to remember what my answer is here in a minute too for future. All right. So here's our SF86. I'm on the use of alcohol section. Hopefully everybody can see that now. Okay. So let's check this out together. Okay. Use of alcohol had negative impact on your work performance, professional history, So again, it's looking at the impact here. So in this question, it's focused on, has alcohol impacted your ability to do your job? There's use of alcohol. Here's another question. Been ordered, advised, or asked to seek counseling or treatment. So no, I don't think we are to the question yet. Voluntarily sought counseling or treatment. Received counseling or treatment. You can see where some of these questions are going to with the way that this is set up. This is kind of self-adjudicating. This is a good example of a section to look at. Have you ever done these things? Have you ever actually either been ordered or done on your own, sought help to, kind of remediate your situation there? Okay. And that's it. So there's nothing there about disclosing if you drank 21 or drank before you were 21. So I'm going to skip back up here. The section right before this is illegal use of drugs and drug activity. So I'm going to start there. We're going to look at that one too. And this is the best way I know how to do this, gang, is, we're going to look at the thing. We're going to look at the source here and see if there's any place for it. All right. I'm still continued. So this is a big section. Again, this is why I was saying earlier, don't worry about the format. You get one of these online. There's a lot of like continuation pages, and some of them are copies and pastes. You can see the kind of things here that they consider type of drug or controlled substances. They also have an other. So have you illegally used any drugs or controlled substances? Okay. So to answer your question, if you want to go down the line of, I am being completely transparent, you may in this section to do that, check other and say consumed alcohol prior to the age of 21. You could do that here, right? You can put some estimations here. And then look, these are important here. Did you do this while you're holding a security clearance? Because they will acknowledge the fact that maybe nobody ever told you you couldn't do that. Now, this one, underage drinking is another thing, but you can at least say, well, I wasn't cleared at that time. So, I didn't have a security officer tell me not to do things. It's a way out. But you could do that here. That could be a way to document it. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody do that. But if you want to keep your conscience clear, and I will tell you all, if you're ever going for one of these higher level accesses, you sat down in a polygraph room, you need to be comfortable with what's on here, because they're looking at your SF86 and they're going to ask you everything about it. If you don't have one there, you drank when you were 19, and they start asking you about drinking when you're underage, you need to be able to tell them that. And then you got to watch yourself in these polygraphs too, because then the polygrapher could decide, well, I'm going to use that to kind of take you down a path and make you question some things. And once you get down a path there, that can be a whole nother set of issues. So put everything on here. That's one way to do it. You can go into this section, do that. The investigator may look at it and be like, wow, really, thanks for telling me that, but I don't care. And it's kind of one of those things that, I hate to minimize this a little bit, but you went to college. They probably assumed you did. So telling them is fine. This is the way I would do it. Because technically that is, whoops. That would fall under the have you ever legally used a controlled substance? And you could qualify alcohol as a controlled substance. You could. It's not anything like on this list, but it is controlled. People under the age of 21 cannot buy it. So I've never answered the question that way because I've never been asked that question. So you kind of put me on the spot, but hopefully that made some kind of sense. And I would be comfortable with that. If somebody put that on a form that I was reviewing, I'd say, okay, that's somebody trying to be as honest as possible.
Great. And, actually, as we're looking at this, there are some questions that talk about your family.
Yes.
And so like, you're clean and all that, but your spouse is a drug user, or your spouse has been, so one set of stuff is illegal activity. The other is like, what if, because, we understand that, the government wants to know, like, are you mentally stable? Would they investigate your spouse? If your spouse has been institutionalized, is that something that they're going to be asking about?
So it's possible, and I'm coming up here to the relative section. That's why I'm scrolling, because there are certain relatives you have to list. They have sections for pretty much everybody. I just wanted to put the list up here. It's mother, it's father, it's mother-in-law, father-in-law, brothers, sisters. They don't go into cousins and any of that stuff, I don't think, but children. Hang on a second. I'm going to get there. I'm trying to remember the list, and it's better to just show you.
And while you're scrolling, one of the
Yes.
questions came in. I think we know the answer. We talked about alcohol use. What about nicotine use? Cigarettes, similar story?
Similar story. If you did those things under the age of 18, that's an 18, because if you remember, that section was a have you ever. So you could do the same thing. You could use that other box and put your explanation in there for full transparency. I would say go that route, the same as the underage consumption of alcohol. And I will tell everybody that if you want to do that, to be comfortable doing that. Don't worry that's going to, again, there's no automatic disqualifiers. They're taking all the information in. So put on this form, figure out how to do that in this form. Now there's a section at the very end. Okay, here, I'm getting to the list now. At the very end where you can do, is there anything else you want to tell us? And you can just use that section to just bleed all over the page. You just tell them everything that didn't have a place in any one of these, or you couldn't find a good fit for where to put it, and you feel the need, you got to tell them. Use that very last section to just document everything. So here's the list of relatives. Mother, father, stepmother, stepfather, child, stepbrother, brother, sister, stepbrother, stepsister, half brother, half sister. Thought they had in-laws too. Maybe that's in another section. So this part here, 18.1, is going to cover those folks. And as I scroll down a little bit, there we go. 18.2 expands the list a little more to in-laws. And 18.3 has some more stuff. So when you see this in EKIP, they start with just a list of check boxes for all of these categories. So you start checking what's applicable to you, because not everybody has half brothers and half sisters. Not everybody's married, so you don't have in-laws. You only check the boxes that are applicable to you. And when you go to the next screen, it starts dropping in these info boxes for each person. So fill out your father's name, fill out your mother's name. Are they deceased? Are they, are they still alive? All of that stuff. So, and then you also put some other things in here, because we have people that are married to foreign nationals. Okay, well, here's some things in here. You have to disclose the status of your spouse or any of these folks. We have people whose immediate family members, their parents, are foreign nationals. And so you have to disclose these things, and you have to know a lot. You can see the kind of information that they ask about here. So if you're filling this out for your mother or father, provide approximate frequency of contact. Don't be afraid if you talk to your parents every day and they're foreign national, and that's going to keep you from getting a clearance. Again, be transparent. How much do they investigate? they're going to look at they're going to look at your spouses more than like your parents or your siblings. They may talk to your spouse if you if you are divorced, they may talk to your ex-spouse. It all again depends on what the investigator really wants to get into about you. And typically reaching out to an ex is they're gonna get all the goods on you there. So so yeah, just be mindful of those things. Yes, you got to list them on here. Yes, the investigators may talk to them. What they may ask depends on what that person's situation is. But keeping in mind, they're looking at it from the perspective of how it influences you. You're the one being adjudicated for eligibility, not them. But they have influence over you. That's just the way life is. Your spouse has influence over you. So regardless of what anybody wants to admit, that's very true. So when you're going through these things, and I will always tell folks, when I'm doing this, every time I put somebody's name on here, as soon as I get this out of my hands, I'm calling them, texting them, emailing them, and letting them know, hey, this is what's happening. You may get a phone call in 1 to 8 months. I don't know. But just remember, I told you that this could potentially happen. And so, yeah, so it's possible they could spend a lot of time with your spouse if they're a foreign national, they do a lot of foreign travel, all of these things, do they have relations to, are they in kind of related to a foreign government situation? I've seen that happen before. So it all just really depends. It all depends on the situation.
Yeah, so actually I will take one of because we are coming close to time, but we got a few more actually really good questions. One is what money to family or whatever in in a foreign country?
Yeah, so there's two different things with that. Do you hold the bank account? Because that's one thing on its own. There's questions here about foreign ownership. Do you have a foreign bank account? That's important, not just for your clearance. That's IRS rules too. So you need to be mindful what you're doing there if you have foreign bank accounts. If you're sending money overseas to family or whatever it is, again, you're looking at the financial records section, and a transfer of money. Again, you got to look at your IRS rules too. There's two things happening here. That could be a taxable situation for the United States. Yeah, hard to know. Just kind of depends on how much you're sending and where you're sending it to, I think, in most cases. I'm not a tax law expert, so I won't go too much further than that. But yeah, I mean, you could put something on here about, here's my brother lives in Turkey and I send him some money. Well, there's a section here you can do this. You can say, I talk to him every once in a while. Describe the relative's relationship with other governments, et cetera, but I'm pretty sure there's a place. Yeah, provide methods of contact. So you can put other, and I send some money every once in a while. And so you're being transparent, you're trying to tell them what's going on. I think
and a thing to be mindful of if they are a member of the Taliban.
That's going to be a problem.
Consider whether you want to go through with the process.
There are, there's going to be other laws that are going to kick you in the head on that one too. So if you're sending money to a sanctioned entity or organization, Taliban's a good example, ISIS-K, whatever it is, you're going to get tripped up in a lot of ways. That allegiance to the United States is probably going to come in as one of the adjudicative guidelines. So yeah, I would say it's like anything else. You do your due diligence, make sure before you engage, even if it's a family member, that what you're getting yourself into. If your family member is doing some things that they aren't supposed to be doing, that could drag you down. That could drag you down on this.
Yeah. Looking at the other side, what if you have a family member that has an active current top secret clearance? Does that help?
It'll help when they get called for an interview because they're going to know what they're going to get asked. Nope, it's the same situation like with your spouse. They're looking at you. Now, the fact that you are in you went into the family business of being a DOD employee, and your parents had clearances and your brother has a clearance or your sister has a clearance, you can at least go in and say, yeah, I've been around it. What I'm allowed to know, generally know what you can and can't do. You're going to have maybe a better position in terms of your ability to be adjudicated, but their situation is not going to impact your situation any more than probably that.
Yeah, I mean, and I can, little clue from my personal experience. It took me about 160 hours to collect all the information for my SF-86.
Sounds about right.
But I'm also a little bit older than most of the people on the webinar. And the thing is, if you have a brother or a parent or whatever who's filled out this form, probably half the form you already have the answers to. Where did you live? Where did you work? What's your family doing? Are they citizens? If they were born overseas, what their DD-240 says. So, if nothing else, it makes the process faster. We do have, we do have like at least 2 more minutes. So in the 2 more minutes, let me just see if there's something. One is, so first of all, the person is asking if they are an immigrant. And so one thing I think we should point out, and I talked about this last time, it is not impossible, but it's highly unlikely for someone who's not a US citizen to get a clearance. But let's assume that you're an immigrant. You've got your citizenship or permanent status. How does that impact the process?
Sure. So there's a really, I'll do the best I can the time we have. If you are not a US citizen, and that includes being a dual citizen. So let me start there. You are not in any way, shape, or form a citizen of the United States. You're a permanent resident, maybe citizen of another country. You won't get a clearance. There is a very little known process called a limited access authorization, or LAA. You can apply for that. Now, those are very tightly guarded. I'd be shocked if any of us could get one of those. The government goes out and seeks people in the international community and says, we're going to bring them in for our purposes. So anybody here that does not at least hold one citizenship as United States, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get a clearance because the limited access authorization is not really used for us contractors. So that's piece 1. Piece 2, I think I saw the question here. Dual citizens, US plus somewhere else. You hold passports for both countries. I will tell you that every agency will do this differently. I've had some folks get cleared through intelligence agencies. They don't bat an eye at this. They say, okay, that's fine. They may require that you turn your foreign passport into your security officer as a requirement to be adjudicated. And the security officer has to validate with that office that they have it locked in the safe for as long as you're cleared. Once you're debriefed, they give it back to you. I've had some instances on the DoD side where they say you have to relinquish your foreign citizenship in order to be cleared. I have some that have not required that. Every case is different. I'm going to guess a lot of it depends on what nation that citizenship is from. These days and times, you can guess some places they're going to be a little more cautious than others, but it's all going to boil down to the end, and they won't tell you up front. That's going to happen through the process. They're going to let you go all the way through the process, and then at the end, they're going to tell you what you got to do in exchange for your eligibility. That's how it's going to work. So you may not know for months what you got to do if you're a dual citizen. Does that help a little bit?
Yep, I hope so. And I was about to type an answer. Have you run into cryptocurrencies?
Oh, yeah.
People with cryptocurrencies. What can you talk about that?
Cryptocurrency. It's actually spelled out in that C3 guidance from DCSA because this question has come up a lot. The issue is foreign-backed cryptocurrency. You have to disclose that you own foreign-backed cryptocurrency. If you know if your cryptocurrency is foreign-backed, you're a leg up over everybody else. Cryptocurrency, that's the nature of it. It's so decentralized. It's hard to know if it's foreign-backed or not. So what I've been advising our folks is it's not illegal to own cryptocurrency. You need to disclose it, though, because you're not sure. Today it could be owned here, tomorrow it could be owned there. Just disclose it, move on. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's great. And the other reminder, there are just regular disclosure requirements. Like if you've made money with crypto, you have to tell the IRS and all that. And again,
Yep.
we're looking to make sure that you're trustworthy. And one way we measure that is, are you following the rules? There are still some more. In fact, there's a question that is going to make a great thing for the next show. So I am, in fact, going to take away your screen.
Oh,
and,
yes.
put up
There you go.
what is coming next. So we are going to talk in our next webinar on the government agency clearances, rules, and regulations. Mr. Tallarico touched upon this. Again, we are not making up these rules. The agencies, even though it feels like it, they're not necessarily just making up the rules. There are a number of laws, executive orders, and regulations, and it's a little helpful to know that because it helps you understand why these questions are being asked and what they're looking for. So that's coming up on April 26th at noon Eastern time. And with that, we're not going to have questions. We had them all because it's time, but I want to thank all of you. Thank you again, Mr. Tallarico, for your time and sharing your experience in the clearance process. With that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Schock.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you on April 26th. And then if you joined with us via telephone, please feel free to shoot me an email at ashock@vt.edu, so that way we can have your name. But other than that, you are all set. Take care and have a good rest of your day.